A racist store manager wrongly believes he holds all the power until the woman he humiliated walks in the next day with everything he ever wanted. What would you do if the person you disrespected held your future in their hands? Let us know in the comments section below. The first time Rick Dalton noticed her, it wasn't because she was loud. It wasn't because she was stealing. It was because she was black. She hadn't even said a word yet. She just stepped through the automatic doors in her faded zip-up hoodie and black leggings, earbuds in, holding her phone loosely in one hand and a reusable bag folded under the other. Didn't matter. He saw her. Everything in him tensed like a warning siren only he could hear. He stayed behind the customer service counter, pretending to organize discount flyers, but his eyes followed her past aisle 1. Not the usual crowd, he thought, and not dressed for the kind of store he ran. He wasn't new to this. 23 years in retail, 2-time district manager of the year, worked his way up from stock boy to manager of this midtown branch. He prided himself on maintaining order, on keeping the place respectable. So when he saw someone who didn't look like she belonged, he reacted. It wasn't that she was doing anything. That was the problem. She wasn't doing anything. She moved slowly, deliberately, like she had all the time in the world. He stepped out from behind the counter. The store wasn't packed, just the usual trickle of late-morning customers grabbing lunch and snacks, and yet all he could focus on was the sound of her sneakers on the tile. She stopped near the protein bars, pulled one off the shelf, turned it over and put it back. She's casing the place. Rick approached from the side, slow and calm, the way he'd been trained years ago in corporate seminars on theft mitigation. The words were polite, the stares never were. "Can I help you find anything?" he asked, voice sweet but firm. She pulled one earbud out and turned slightly. Her expression was neutral. "No, I'm good. Thanks." Rick didn't move. "You sure? You've been in this aisle a while." "I've been here less than a minute," she said. Then, with a polite nod, "But I'm fine, really." It should have ended there. A normal day. A minor interaction. But Rick didn't move. He folded his arms and tilted his head, trying to read her. "What's your name?" She blinked once, slowly. "Excuse me?" "I asked your name," Rick said, gesturing vaguely. "We've had issues here. Just making sure everything's above board." She tilted her head back slightly, amusement flickering across her lips, then fading into something unreadable. "I didn't know shopping required ID now." "It doesn't," he smiled. "Tight. Unless you're doing something you shouldn't be." There it was, the shift. Her jaw tensed, her hand closed tighter around her phone. "I'm just buying a smoothie," she said quietly. "Not robbing a bank." Rick smirked. "We'll see." He turned and walked away, slow and heavy-footed, hoping to make her feel the weight of being watched. She stood still for a moment, then returned the protein bar to the shelf and headed to the refrigerated section. He watched her from the end cap, watched her pick up a green bottle, glance at the label, and, without another word, place it back. She turned, walked past him, straight toward the exit. He followed, calling after her, "Not gonna pay for that drink?" She didn't turn, just kept walking. He lunged forward and reached for her shoulder, but her voice came first. Calm, clear. "I didn't take anything." Rick's hand hovered in the air, caught between accusation and hesitation. "Check your cameras," she said, eyes locking with his for the first time. "Or ask the cashier." There was no need. He already knew she hadn't taken anything. But he hated the way she looked at him, like she'd already decided he wasn't worth yelling at, like he didn't matter. "I'll be filing a report," he said, trying to regain control. "Loitering, Suspicious behavior. She didn't answer. She walked through the automatic doors like she'd never been there. And Rick stood in the middle of the store, his chest rising and falling faster than it should have. From the register, a teenage cashier whispered to his co-worker, "She didn't do anything, man. That was messed up." Rick spun around. "Mind your own shift." Back in his office, Rick typed up the incident, made it sound more dramatic than it was. Said she refused to leave, raised her voice, drew attention, the usual stuff. He copied it to corporate. Another day, another note in the file. But when he got home that night, something about her expression stayed with him. That stillness, that silence. Like she wasn't angry, but she was something else. She hadn't yelled. She hadn't fought. She hadn't needed to. And that made him more uncomfortable than anything else. The only sound in Natasha Anders' penthouse that morning was the soft clink of a spoon stirring into glass. She preferred the quiet. It made her thoughts louder, clearer. The steamed oat milk, cinnamon, protein powder, measured, mixed, precise. Just like everything else in her life now. She took a sip, her body still aching from the early morning boxing session. She'd needed it. She always needed it more on days like this. Days when the past brushed too close to the surface. She wasn't mad. Not really, not at Rick Dalton anyway. That kind of ignorance was too small to be called rage-worthy. But something about the look in his eyes had pressed an old bruise she'd buried years ago. She pulled her laptop from the black leather briefcase by the island and opened it, sunlight crawling across the hardwood floor. One unread message stood out, flagged by her assistant. Subject: Urgent franchise opportunity. Reopened for private bid. Natasha read it twice. Then she smiled. The timing was ridiculous, no, cosmic. Her fingers tapped quickly, setting up a meeting with Tasha Monroe and Avery Lynn for 11:30 sharp. She clicked on the franchise profile. Midtown. Same store, same block. Chain just went under review due to multiple complaints. Poor management, stagnant sales. The company wanted it off their books before Q3. They were offering direct bids to pre-qualified buyers. She met all of the criteria. In fact, she owned 2 other stores in the same franchise umbrella. And no one, not the franchise owners, not corporate, not the store manager, had any idea who she was when she walked in that day. They didn't ask. That's what always got her. No one asked. They saw the hoodie, the leggings, the cocoa skin, the silence, and made their own little story. She didn't need revenge. That would have been too easy, too cheap. Natasha had learned long ago that the most effective correction wasn't loud. It was undeniable. By 11:20 she was in her boardroom. The skyline framed her like a painting. Her presence was commanding, but calm, the calm that came from surviving. Tasha Monroe walked in first, her short curls bouncing with every step, iPad in hand, already mid-sentence. The paperwork's clean. All we need is a final signature and a call to Walters, and we can close within 24 hours. But she paused, raising an eyebrow as she sat across from Natasha. Is this about yesterday? Avery Lynn stepped in next, dark blazer, colder demeanor. She didn't sit. He doesn't make business decisions based on emotions, Avery said coolly. It's a good investment. The manager's a liability. The staff is undertrained. The store's been bleeding money for 2 years. With rebranding, a new rollout, and upgraded tech, we can double their revenue in 10 months. Natasha looked between them. Both of you are right. She sipped her green smoothie slowly. But this isn't personal. It's a response. Tasha blinked. That sounds personal. Natasha smiled softly. When someone steps on you, they expect you to bark, not to buy the floor they're standing on. There was silence for a beat. Then Avery broke it. "Do you want to be there in person when we inform the team?" Natasha shook her head. "Not yet." She leaned back, folding her arms across her chest. "Let's give it 24 hours. I want to walk in again, just like before. Same clothes, same bag." Tasha nodded slowly, understanding blooming in her eyes. "You want to see if it happens again?" "I want to give him a choice," Natasha said, "same as he gave me." The next morning came too fast. Natasha didn't sleep much the night before, not because of stress, but because her mind wandered, not to Rick, but to the version of herself he'd assumed. She thought about her first job, scrubbing grills and emptying trash in a burger place that stank of fryer oil and old soda syrup. She remembered how Mr. Harvey used to call her kid, even though she was 16. Never used her name, just kid. She remembered how she'd saved every tip, folded every receipt into neat stacks, took the night shift because she knew it kept her out of the house, out of foster rooms that never quite felt like homes. No one there ever knew she was top of her class, that she got into college at 17, that she had dreams. They only saw what they wanted. So she learned to stop correcting people. Instead, she built something too strong to ignore. That was the part Rick Dalton never got to see. When he would, he pulled the same hoodie on, same leggings, same foldovers bag. She tied her hair up in the same careless bun. And then, just before leaving, she slid a small envelope into her pocket. Back at the store, Rick Dalton was already scanning the morning team schedule. Brenda had called out. Again. He muttered to himself and rubbed the back of his neck, agitated, as he made his way to the stockroom. He didn't see her walk in. All treatment, not at first. But a customer's pause near the energy drinks caught his attention, and like instinct, he turned and saw the hoodie. He squinted, his breath catching a little. No way. She was back? Why? He watched her move, this time to the health food section. She was looking at something, reading ingredients. Calm. Again. He took a breath, walked out slow, but something inside him felt different. Not scared, just aware. She looked up. They locked eyes. Rick cleared his throat. Back again? She nodded. Told ya, just wanted a smoothie. He opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. She hadn't done anything wrong. Not yesterday, not today. And yet, here she was, returning. Like she had nothing to prove. He hesitated. The words he'd rehearsed. Something about policy, safety, just doing his job. Suddenly he felt small. Weak. He said nothing. She gave a soft smile. No questions today? Rick shifted his weight. No, ma'am. You're free to shop. She raised her eyebrows. That's new. Rick's face flushed red. He glanced around, hoping no one had heard. And then, without another word, she walked past him. But before she reached the counter, she stopped, turned, pulled something from her hoodie pocket. She walked back to him and held out the envelope. Rick blinked. What's this? A receipt, she said, handing it over. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letterhead with her name, Natasha Anders, founder and CEO, The Anders Group. New owner, Midtown franchise, 216. Rick's fingers tightened slightly on the paper. She gave him one last look. I figured you'd want to know who you were talking to. And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Rick standing alone, paper trembling in his hand. Rick Dalton didn't sleep the night after she handed him that envelope. He told himself it wasn't a big deal, it was just a new owner. Happens all the time in retail. 1 minute you're running the show, the next you're answering to someone half your age with a business degree and no clue how to mop a floor. But this wasn't that. This was the same woman he'd followed around the store like a thief. The same woman he'd watched like she was dangerous just for wearing sneakers and keeping to herself. And now she owned the building he worked in. And she knew exactly who he was. He read the letterhead again. Her name sat there, elegant and clean. Natasha Anders. It felt heavy, not just because of the job implications, but because of what it said about him. Rick had always believed he was fair. Tough, maybe. A little suspicious of people, sure, but fair. The kind of guy who told his kids to work hard, to follow the rules, to respect people who earned it. Now he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he was the kind of man who never noticed who he was stepping on. And worse, never thought twice about it. By morning, corporate had already sent out a chain-wide email confirming the new ownership. The locations would be undergoing rebranding under the Anders Group. Each store's management team was being evaluated. Mandatory meetings were set for the end of the week. The Midtown branch had theirs scheduled for noon today. Rick looked at his watch, 11:15. He adjusted his collar twice before walking into the back office. He tried not to show nerves, but the team could feel it. They watched him move differently. Less bark, more silence. He barely spoke to the cashiers. Didn't nitpick the shelving. When Brenda showed up late again, he just nodded, instead of unloading on her like he usually did. Something had shifted, and everyone knew it. At 11:59, a black SUV pulled up out front. No driver, no entourage. Just Natasha. Same calm walk. Different outfit. Tailored slacks, a cream blazer, heels that clicked like a metronome of control. She carried no bag this time. Just a phone in one hand and a slim folder in the other. Rick saw her through the front window and stood, the room tightening around him. Tasha Monroe entered right behind her, checking off names on a clipboard. Avery Lynn came next, quiet, unreadable. They walked in like this was just business, and to them it was. Natasha didn't look around the store. She already knew what it looked like. Instead, she walked straight through to the back, her expression giving nothing away. Rick stood with the assistant managers, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Sweat gathered near his collar. No one spoke. Tasha handed out folders to each department head. Avery set up a laptop on the break room table. The air buzzed with waiting. And then Natasha looked up. "Let's begin." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that commanded silence because it carried weight, not volume. "I know this is unexpected," she said. "Change usually is." She didn't look at Rick directly, but he felt every syllable. This store is now part of a pilot program under new ownership. We've identified key underperforming branches that, with the right support and restructuring, could return to full profitability within 2 quarters. She paused, letting the words settle. This location, she continued, was selected not just because of its potential, but because of its people. Rick felt a strange flutter in his chest. She saw the confusion on a few faces and softened her tone. "These includes all of you?" Now she looked at him. Rick met her eyes, then quickly dropped his. Natasha turned her attention back to the table. "You'll see new policies in your folders. Most of them are upgrades, pay increases for hourly staff, better training modules, updated tech. We're also implementing a culture audit. Everyone will be evaluated, but no one's being let go today." There was an audible exhale across the room. Natasha folded her arms. "But," she added, "accountability is part of growth, and there are some things that can't go unnoticed." She let her gaze move slowly across the room before landing back on Rick. "Sometimes, leadership needs a reset too." Rick felt his heart dip. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Natasha didn't gloat. There was no triumph in her expression. "Is the truth. I'm not here to embarrass anyone," she said. But this job is more than numbers. It's about the people who walk into the store every day, people who deserve to be seen. Rick clenched his jaw. She turned to Tasha. Please distribute the evaluations. One-on-ones begin tomorrow. And she looked back at him, this time with something else in her eyes, something he didn't expect. Not anger, not pride. Something like invitation. He couldn't take it. Not anymore. I didn't know, he said suddenly, voice rough. The room fell quiet. I didn't know who you were, he added. Natasha nodded slowly. I know. I judged you, Rick continued, based on how you looked. I thought I was doing my job, but I wasn't. A few heads turned toward him. Finally, I'm not asking for anything, he said, forcing the words out. Just, I wanted to say it. I was wrong. There it was. Nothing fancy, no rehearsed speech, just the truth. Natasha stared at him for a moment longer, then closed her folder. That's a start, she said. Now, let's see what you do with it. She turned and left the room, her team following behind her. Rick sat back down slowly, the heat in his chest giving way to something colder, not fear. Responsibility. For the first time in years, he felt it. Not because someone above him demanded it, but because someone below him, someone he'd overlooked, rose above him without saying a word. It was humbling. And humbling, Rick realized, is a kind of grace, too. The meeting ended. People murmured. Brenda glanced at Rick with wide eyes, like she'd never seen him before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe none of them had. He opened the folder in front of him. On the first page, in bold letters, were 3 words. Leadership Performance Review, and beneath that, in smaller font, Evaluator, Natasha Anders. Rick Dalton sat alone in the break room long after the meeting ended. He didn't move, didn't touch the coffee that had gone cold beside him. His mind kept looping the same sentence over and over. That's a start. It wasn't a dismissal. It wasn't forgiveness either. It was a door left cracked open. He had spent years thinking of himself as a man who followed rules, who worked hard and stayed out of trouble. He didn't steal, didn't cheat, didn't drink on the job or abuse his title. But now he was seeing the one thing he had done. He'd stopped seeing people. And when you stop seeing people, you stop treating them like they matter. He flipped through the evaluation forms again. Not one of them surprised him. His weaknesses were all there in black ink. Inconsistent delegation, low staff morale, high turnover, complaints of microaggressions, documented, not fabricated. Some part of him wanted to get defensive, wanted to say they just didn't get him. But that part of him was shrinking, getting smaller every minute. He stayed until the janitor peeked in and said, "We're locking up, Mr. Dalton." Rick nodded. "Yeah, I'm leaving." The next morning, he was the first one in. Not to rearrange shelves or bark orders, but to clean. No clipboard, no power trip, just Rick, on his knees, scrubbing the base of the counter, where gum had dried into a black fossil. He emptied trash cans, took inventory manually, helped Isaiah, the 17-year-old part-timer, with a display that had fallen apart. The employees noticed. No one said anything at first, but they noticed. By the time Natasha returned 3 days later for her scheduled walkthrough, the store felt different. There were fresh flowers near the entrance, handwritten signs made by the staff in bright markers. Someone had restocked the snack bar with healthier options. And the mood? Light, like someone had opened a window and let the air change. Natasha walked in quietly, observing. Rick didn't rush to her. He didn't hover. He just nodded politely and returned to helping a customer who didn't know which vegan protein powder to buy. And when the woman walked away smiling, Natasha finally approached him. "You've been busy," she said. Rick wiped his hands on his apron and nodded. "Trying to earn the right to be here." She tilted her head. "You already earned your place years ago. You just forgot what to do with it." That hit deeper than he expected, but it didn't sting, it settled. He looked at her. "You planning to keep me?" Natasha didn't answer right away. She walked toward the front desk, examined the new signage, and then turned back. "You're not who you were last week," she said, "but I don't hire based on guilt or fear." Rick nodded. "But I do hire based on effort, humility, ownership." He swallowed hard. "So," he said, her voice softening, "you've got a probationary review, 90 days, new training modules. You'll report directly to Tasha Monroe during that time." Rick exhaled slowly. "That sounds fair." "Good," she said, turning to leave. Then she paused and glanced over her shoulder. "And Rick?" He straightened. "You ever make someone feel like you made me feel that first day? You won't need a review. You'll be gone." Her eyes didn't blink. Rick held the gaze and nodded. "Understood." She looked at him a second longer, then finally, gave him a small smile, the kind that said, "This was the ending you got to write, not the one you deserved, the one you chose." The next week, the Midtown branch posted its first 5-star review in over a year. It wasn't about the store. It was about Rick. Came in looking for something quick and left with more than I expected. The manager helped me pick out groceries for my son's allergy. He didn't rush. He listened. He treated me like I mattered. First time in a while I've felt that in a store like this. Pam Judson. Rick read that review twice in the break room, biting the inside of his cheek just to keep the emotion from rising. His team had noticed the change too. Brenda actually smiled at him now. Isaiah had started asking him for college advice. The place was coming alive, and Rick, for the first time in a long time, felt proud of more than just clean shelves and balanced ledgers. He felt proud of how he showed up. Then, on a warm Friday morning, Natasha returned again. But this time, with flyers in hand. "Career fair," she told the team as they gathered near the front. "We're expanding, hiring for several new branches. I want you all to invite anyone you think deserves a shot." Rick stayed back at first, but Natasha waved him forward. "You too." He blinked. "You want me to recruit?" "You've got something most people don't," she said. "You've changed. People trust that." Rick nodded slowly, his hands gripping the flyer as if it were something more than paper. The next week, the fair buzzed with energy. Dozens of people filtered in. Young, old, first-timers, former employees, hopeful eyes in every direction. Rick was manning one of the interview booths, taking resumes, asking questions, doing what Natasha had done to him, seeing people fully, until one face made his breath catch. The man walked in, shoulders hunched, suit wrinkled. He looked around nervously and almost turned to leave, until Rick stood up. "Excuse me," Rick said, calling out. The man paused. "You here for the career fair?" He nodded, stepping forward slowly. Rick reached for his resume and read the name at the top. Thomas Greeley. Rick blinked once, twice. "Used to work at Fairgrove Market, right?" Rick asked. Thomas looked surprised. "Yeah? Till last month. They downsized. Managers said I wasn't right for the brand." Rick exhaled through his nose, remembering how he used to say things like that. "Well," he said, tapping the resume gently, "tell me what you're looking for." Thomas hesitated, then said quietly, "I just want a place that gives me a chance." Rick nodded. And with no hesitation this time, he said, "Then let's talk about how we can give you one." From the side of the room, Natasha watched the interaction. She saw Rick lean in, saw him listening, taking notes, asking about skills, about experience, not judging the shoes, or the hair, or the nervous energy. Natasha walked over beside her, arms folded. "Still think it was just business?" she asked with a grin. Natasha smiled. "No, this one was personal, and worth it." They watched a new chapter unfold, one they didn't have to control, because the seed had already been planted. And in that moment, Natasha felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel at work. Not for herself, but for the people who finally saw what grace really looked like and dared to carry it forward. Forever changed, forever growing, forever rising. They greet each other,